Hi, and thanks for tuning in to our live radio show. Moments of Clarity with Tiffany will begin in just a few moments. Please stay tuned. Kindly take this opportunity to share this show on your platforms, because change can only come when we stand together as one, especially when it comes to ending the stigma on mental health.
You are not alone, and help is out there.
Kids have mental health issues, and we also need to learn coping skills.
Let's get started and let the show begin. See you soon.
Don't put yourself down, time for a change. Believe in yourself, time to rearrange. Be your best friend, bring hope to your day. Lose your critic, get out of your way. Now it clicks, moments of clarity. Now I hear moments of clarity. Now I get it, moments of clarity. To yourself be kind, it will please your mind. Find your joy, trust in you. Put in the time, you'll see how you grow. Many kinds of love you get to define. Find self-love, your soul will align. Now it clicks, moments of clarity. Now I hear moments of clarity. Now I get it, moments of clarity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. I'm Tiffany Warner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm your host. Today, we're going to have probably a trigger disclaimer in the very beginning of the fact that this story is going to be jaw-dropping, heartbreaking, but with a good ending. And while we are all here
to hear the ECCQ Bum Book Radio Show. We feature local small business owners with great deals
radio bound yet
and restaurants in our listening area. And anyone
Thank
interested.
you so much, Albert Grieves, for being here. Grieve, author of Loved One, You Are Loved. I also have LP Larry Penton on standby as well, and Tan Talk Radio will be joining us in just a moment. Say hi to some people. Hi, Kenny Miles. How are you? And Summit Innovations. Oh, so nice. Looking forward to your show all week.
celebrity gossip, breaking news, and more. Their expert guests are in the know and in the now. To learn more about this unique program and its hosts, tune into the show on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Welcome to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Werner, licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. Moments of Clarity's mission is to educate and end the stigma on mental health through the inspirational stories of our exceptional guests. You can join in the show by calling Tiffany toll-free at 866-826-1340 or on Facebook and Twitter at MOC with Tiffany. Now, here's Tiffany Werner.
Hello, and welcome to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. My name is Tiffany Werner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about some things that might trigger you: domestic violence, abuse, child abuse, things of that nature, by somebody that's not only been through it, but as an advocate to help others get through it and get the help that they need. And before I formally introduce my guest, I want to say hi to Ed.
And a happy Friday to everybody.
What's up, Ed? How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. Happy Friday to you too. And what's new with you?
Nothing.
Today we're gonna have
just lull. It's like this lull period. You know, the holidays are over, Easter's over, and then I don't know. What are we? July 4th?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of wait for that, I guess. I don't know.
Well, we were just saying like a couple shows ago.
It's right around the corner, you know.
We were like thinking, okay, well, we don't have any major holidays coming up for a little bit. Take a break.
Yeah.
Relax, not have to worry about appeasing people or worrying and wishing that we had people to appease or whatever our situation is, right?
Weather's been nice, so yeah, absolutely.
And Paul is going kind of away. I drank some hot tea before the show, so my voice would be a little bit clearer.
There you go.
Anyway, my guest today, so like I said, trigger warning, is a former police officer, Albert Grieve, a former foster youth and survivor of child abuse, neglect, and domestic violence. He graduated valedictorian from undergrad and served as a police officer before attending law school. Graduating law school, he served as a litigation attorney for social services, protecting the vulnerable and helping children reach permanency. Afterwards, he transitioned into training practitioners on legal and investigatory issues concerning abuse, neglect, and domestic violence. He's also the author of a book called Little One You Are Loved, and while his book is available for purchase, the story can be found free on YouTube. And welcome to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany, Albert Grieve.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you. I really do.
I'm honored to have you here. So when we spoke yesterday, excuse me, the allergies are. When we spoke yesterday, as I was very clear, I wanted your story organic, just to kind of hear it for the first time in full. But you started telling me little bits, and my jaw still dropped, and a tear came to my eye anyway. So let's start from the beginning. I know that you have had not a very easy life, and that you're not afraid to tell about it, because it's with every story that we share, more people can be helped, and change comes when we stand together as one, right?
Absolutely.
So let's start from the beginning.
All right. And I know you gave a warning, but I always like to give one as well. So some of the things I talk about may serve as a trigger for something you experienced or something someone you know may have experienced. And so I encourage you to exercise self-care. Even as an adult, even as a practitioner that trains on these issues, I have to exercise self-care, and I have to take mental health very, very serious. But I grew up in Sacramento, California. I was a middle child of three. My father Used to work full time initially, but he ended up staying at home to take care of my mom because my mom was diagnosed with paranoia schizophrenia, and she wasn't able to take care of us. That was the cover story, but what the deeper part of it is that my mom actually grew up as a victim of domestic violence and child sexual abuse, and she had been diagnosed with depression. And we weren't as forward thinking and as informed, trauma informed about those issues. And so they diagnosed her with depression and they gave her meds. And so then she got with my father, who was an angry and abusive alcoholic. And that created a dynamic by which every time my mom would reach out to the authorities about something going on, my father would actually weaponize her mental health. And so her diagnosis went from depression to paranoia schizophrenia. And every time she would tell the authorities, my husband is trying to kill me or he's doing these types of things to my kids, my father would weaponize her health, show the law enforcement the meds that she was on, and they would think that she was delusional and they would put her in a mental institution. This was a cycle that seemed to go on about
just for trying to self-report violence and that she was in danger. Then they would see her meds and just automatically assume. That's why we end the stigma on mental health in this. And I'm sorry for interrupting. I don't want to just put that in there. That what we want to do is end the stigma on mental health, because people getting antipsychotics are not scary people. People that are taking these kind of medications are not delusional. In fact, the medications make them usually non-delusional. Not everybody is the same. We are all a bunch of snowflakes. Not one of us is exactly alike. And that I don't know what the word crazy means. I know that people that don't think that they have a problem are more likely to, I don't know, those people scare me the most because they don't want help, that they think nothing could be wrong with them. It's usually something that you have to have a red flag on. But
my father was in that camp of not believing anything was wrong. And he was also very articulate whenever the authorities would come. And so my mom would be disheveled and very besides herself because of all the stuff going on in our home. And then my father being very charismatic and articulate and being a domestic violence abuser would use that against her. And really, my mom was just trying to reach out for help time and time again. And the result is she would be institutionalized and she would stay in those facilities, 30, 40 days. They keep playing around with her dosages and her medications until she recanted.
Excuse me.
And then every time she recanted, it reinforced the next time when my father would say that she was delusional. But really, she was being drugged for trying to ask for help. And it continued to get worse. But parallel to this, there was physical abuse that was going on in the home. It escalated over time. It got to a point where when I went to school, I would be seen with visible injuries, and the school would make these concerned phone calls home. But they wouldn't do anything to address the underlying issues. They wouldn't provide treatment or resources. So all they would do is inform my father, the abuser, this is what we see that's wrong. And so the abuse would change in form. We learned how to hide it better as kids.
And you probably got in trouble for snitching or getting him even questioned because you had bruises.
No, yeah. If I didn't say what I was supposed to before social services came, I'd be in a whole lot more trouble afterwards. So oftentimes I'd come up with a cover story to appease my father and convince him that I can make social services go away. And this, I'm a kid. I'm in elementary school trying to do this, manipulating social workers. So we had the abuse going on to my mother and the abuse happening to myself and my siblings. It got so bad that I had trouble sleeping at night. And one of my coping modalities at night is I would bang my head on a pillow until I just became exhausted and fell asleep. And it wasn't until like about a year ago that I realized that this is very common for very extreme abusive situations. So had I not been one of those people to speak up about mental health, I wouldn't know that one of these things I thought as a child was horrible and that I was ashamed of is actually a defense mechanism and something that helped me process. Unfortunately, my siblings didn't like when I did it. They could hear it. And I would get in trouble for doing this at night, banging my head on the pillow. And so I would stay up later and later at night waiting for my sisters to go to sleep so I can start my routine. And that's when I started learning that my father was having sex with my older sister, because he would come into the bedroom and he would have sex with my sister, especially when my mom was in a mental institution. Sometimes he would go into he would bring her into the parents' bedroom, and he would do it there. But a lot of times it'd be in the children's bedroom, and so then I'd have to wait for this to finish, and then he'd leave, and then I'd start banging my head and try to go to sleep. And this is something that just continuously escalated. I think my mom went to a battered spouse's shelter 3 times. She was institutionalized 13 times. It just happened again and again and again, and the violence got worse and worse and worse. And you would think that we would create enough documentation and there would be enough phone calls that they would take action. But it brings me to the topic of the show. If it takes a village to raise a child, what does it take to raise and nurture a child that's been abused or neglected? Well, in my case, it wasn't even a village. It was people that were going in individually, siloed. They were taking their information. They weren't communicating with their peers within the agency, let alone discussion between the agencies. So they had this.
You guys were falling through the cracks.
Exactly. Yes.
And then
we had a mountain of documentation. It's just that no one was actually taking a step back, digging deep, and looking at the full picture.
You were taught at a young age how to manipulate the service, the system, the social services, everything, because you were going to get in a lot more trouble than telling the truth, even though secretly you were crying for help. Like, you were crying for help, but you had been proven that when you cried for help, your mother would be institutionalized, so she couldn't protect you, and you were with the abuser. And your only coping skill, and this saddens me, is bang your head on a pillow, but you had to wait for your father to stop raping your sister before you could even cope. So you had to sit there and listen to that or watch that and be pre-exposed as a child to incest as well. Right there. Okay, show over. Thanks for being actually let's leave that as a pause for a second. That's a lot to digest. You were so brave for telling your story.
Thank you.
But it is time for a commercial break. But just that in itself, I mean, Albert, it's just horrifying that these things really do happen. These things happen all the time, even now. And if we don't continue to try to end the stigma on mental health and tell people it's okay to not be okay, and to continue to spread these kind of stories and say, me too, that you're not alone, then the cycle will keep going on. And if any children or any parents are out there that suspect that your child is becoming abused or neglected or anything like that by your spouse, please seek help. Someone will eventually, you never know what you're going to get with the social services or who's going to do their job differently, whatever. I mean, they do their best for the most part. I know that, but not everyone's good at their job. There's, bad cops, bad therapists, bad doctors, bad anything,
Well, not just that, but there's so many of these agencies that lack the resources. They're so short-staffed and
stacks of files on their desk, and
that alone contributes to cases falling between the cracks.
Right. So that too, but we'll get to all this, because banging your head while witnessing incest. I have to take a break, and we'll continue your story when we get back. Moments of clarity in just a moment. Please stay tuned.
You're listening to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Werner. We welcome your input at 866-826-1340. Tiffany will be right back after this.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hello, my name is Lucy Lopes, and I'm a real estate agent that supports ending the stigma on mental health with Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. I am also passionate about helping you buy or sell your home. With times being so difficult, I'm here to help. Contact me at lucylopes.com. That's LUCYLOPES.com. Let me assist you through this pandemic and know that you are not alone.
Hi, this is Tiffany Werner, your host of Moments of Clarity. Living with a mental health disorder is not easy. If you or someone you know are struggling with this, please know it's so important to seek treatment. and I'm here to help. Please visit the website at momentsofclaritywithtiffany.com to view blog posts and resources on this site to help educate and inspire you to take action, because there's no shame in seeking help for mental health. While you're there, please take a few seconds to sign up for my email list. You'll get some extremely valuable educational and entertaining content that can be sent right to your inbox each week. Plus, you'll also get instant and free access to my guide on managing your anxiety. You can also follow me on Twitter at MOC with Tiffany and at Facebook at Tiffany Warner. And once again, the website is momentsofclaritywithtiffany.com. Thank you so much for your support and for listening to your show, because change can only come when we stand together as one.
Are you looking for a great book? If you like to root for the underdog, Joe Potosi's book is a book for you. A real American Odyssey that will grab your attention with its fast-moving narrative. You won't be able to put this masterpiece down. When the Dust Settled by Joe Potosi. Go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Zulin Press.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
We are back to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Warner. To join in the discussion, call 866-826-1340. Now, here's Tiffany Warner.
Hello, and welcome back to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. My name is Tiffany Warner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm your host. And today we have just a disclaimer. We're talking about some really sensitive topics that could be triggered. They're not too graphic, no bad words, but sincerely saddened and by the author, who my guest today is an author of a children's book, Oh Little One, You Are Loved, that he had written, and it's for sale if you choose to, but it's also free on YouTube. And I would like an autographed copy, though, Albert.
Make it happen.
and no, I like that a lot. But Albert's a former foster youth and survivor of child abuse, neglect, and domestic violence, and he still graduated valedictorian from undergrad and served as a police officer before attending law school and so forth. And before we left for our break, he was talking about how he was taught how to lie to social services when he would get beat. His mother had repetitively tried to call for help domestic violence, and because they saw her medication, because she was diagnosed schizophrenic, which, by the way, second opinions, that could have been a misdiagnosis. You never know. But it's really nobody's business when they come in to help with, okay, my child's getting beat and I'm getting beat, and it's not their business to look through medications unless they think someone's intoxicated and like taking opiates or something. I don't know. Anyway, their psych meds have nothing to do with the fact that their partner are plummeting them. Anyway, so meanwhile, while his mother was institutionalized, his father would repeatedly incestually rape his older sister in front of the other kids, mostly. And he had to endure this as a child. And let me just add to this also, not all victims of abuse or survivors, therefore I like the word survivor better than victim, turn into predators as they grow up. That's a myth. Not all. But being pre-exposed to things like that at a young age, horrifying things lead to boundary issues, lack of trust, fear of abandonment, fear of commitment, fear of intimacy, all sorts of fears and anxieties, because you don't know who to look up to, especially a young man like Albert, my guest, to look up to a father like that and not know what his role in life is really hard. So welcome back to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany, Albert Grieve.
Thank you. Would you like me to continue?
Yes, please. I wanted to see where you wanted to pick it up.
No, I'm fine with continuing. And I do want to echo what you said, because statistically speaking, I should be self-medicating through substance abuse. I should be incarcerated. I could be homeless.
You shouldn't be. You could be.
I could be. I think about 4% of former foster youth actually graduate from college. So to go further into this field, get a terminal degree.
Good for you.
to me that, well, just it speaks to me.
Valedictorian too, by the way. You get a bell for that. Like,
Thank you. I think it speaks to my duty. I feel like I'm fortunate in that I've made it, and so it's my job to give back.
who put you through school?
I got scholarships. Education saved me. It 100% saved me.
Same with me.
It allowed me to learn what happened was wrong. It enabled me to provide a life for my family, and it allowed me to prevent them from having to endure anything that I've ever gone through. But going back to my story, as things were continuing to escalate, it was in the summer of 1998. I'm 38 years old now. It was the last opportunity for the authorities to intervene before the homicide. My mom was trying to run away again, and my mother ran into the cul-de-sac. My father chased her outside with a hammer and smashed her in the skull. I don't know how to describe it. You know, that same day, there was so much chaos going on. My father had actually put Tapatio hot sauce in my eyes. He sprayed my eyes with Windex to get it out. He also turned on the oven. It was an electric oven. And he stuck me in it. Whenever there's domestic violence, there's a good chance, high probability that there's also child abuse. So at the very least, they're witnessing it. In my case, there was child abuse, there was animal abuse, there was domestic violence. We had everything. And
Pause for a second. He put hot sauce in your eyes and then Windex to get it out.
Yeah. And you know, I sometimes when I'm sharing my story, I forget that happened. You know, there's so much that we
you just kind of whiz through this, like, because you've probably shared your story more times than everybody. We're hearing this for the first time, and I do the same thing with losing my parents. And when I get interviewed, I can just whiz right through it, and people are like, "Wait, go back, what?" So you just kind of
it's hard.
Yeah, he did that. No, what? You put hot sauce in your eyes and and I'm surprised you're not blind right now.
No, I mean it hurt, it burned, but no,
Why was
kids are very resilient? Well, it's because that my father was at that point he was trying all kinds of creative things to punish me. He used to strangle me a lot. I mean, we usually refer.
You're one of how many siblings? You and your sister?
I have an older sister and a younger sister.
Okay, so you're the only boy. You know, a lot of times they, the abuser thinks that they need to abuse harder to get the child to do what they want when it's counterproductive. By putting hot sauce and whatever, it's going to make them cry more. It's going to make them scared more. It's going to make them react differently.
Well, for the physical abuse,
I'd like to fast forward. Where's your father now?
I don't know. He's no longer in prison. He was indicted for 56 counts of molesting my older sister. He never was charged with homicide. And he got out after on good behavior after about 18 years or so.
So he's out in the open somewhere.
I have no idea where he's at. I actually communicated with him.
Homicide. We haven't gotten to that part yet.
No, we fast forward.
Let's keep going. Sorry, I just wanted to know if he was behind bars, but now he's running the street.
Yeah. Well, as far as the Tapatio and the Windex, because authorities were coming so frequently, he was doing everything he can to injure me in ways that weren't visible. And one of them was strangling, and somehow I just didn't end up with marks on my neck as much, or maybe because of the complexion, but he used to hold me up in the air and he would strangle me often. And I remember I could not touch his hands. I could not try to prevent him because I'd get in more trouble. I just had to sit there and stare into his eyes and wonder if on that day he was going to end me. And time again, he'd drop me on the ground, kick me, beat me, whatever. I remember being dizzy and disoriented. I couldn't block. And even when he kicked me afterwards, it's not like the hits registered, but along with the domestic violence happening to my mom, there was a lot of physical abuse toward me. So on this day with the hammer, he actually hit my mom in the head with the hammer. The ambulance came. She was transported to UC Davis Medical Center. Manipulation is something I learned to protect myself, and it's something that I wasn't proud of because I would, figuratively speaking, throw my siblings or my mom under the bus for self-preservation. And that's one of those burdens that I have to carry to this day. You know, why wasn't I more courageous? You know, I actually tried to run away, but that didn't work out. But on this day, I asked if I can go with my mom to the hospital to make sure that she wasn't going to tell anyone what's going on. So that was my way of escaping. And that was the first day that I tried to commit suicide. When they were treating my mom, I was wandering around the hospital and I found myself on a 5-story parking garage. And I actually went over to the edge and looked over and I thought about jumping. But knowing my luck, I figured I'd probably survive. But that was also one of the highlights of my life too that day, because a medical practitioner, someone in the hospital, I don't know if they're a doctor or nurse or anything, but they found me wandering. They took me to the cafeteria and they sat me down. They bought me a chicken sandwich meal and they just talked to me like a normal child. So like in that moment, the world wasn't just this horrible place I was living in. And that bit of humanity has had a huge impact on the rest of my life, because it's one of those moments that gave me the will to fight. Ultimately, I ended up going home.
Clarity.
Ultimately, I ended up going home, and my mom was institutionalized again. From that point on, things really started getting bad, though, because my mom was seen as being so insanely delusional.
How many times was she institutionalized in total?
13 times that I can find in the records. So after the hammer incident, or leading up to the hammer incident, it actually got to a point where there was a registered nurse that would come weekly to give my mom Halidol shots. But because my father was so violent and aggressive to these facilities, when you get on the phone and call them, they were afraid to go to my house. So you have my father married to my mother, hit my mom in the head with a hammer. Nurse practitioners afraid to go to the house because everything's so violent. The investigative reports show that CPS saw that we were lying as kids, we're parentified, we're trying to protect our father, but Child Protective Services did nothing. The district attorney decided not to press charges because they didn't want us to go into foster care. And my mom stayed in an institution until she recanted. And so fast forward to the end of the year is when the homicide happened. That was the last opportunity to intervene. You know, as an attorney and a former police officer, just that one incident should have been enough. But then there's this mountain of documentation, this escalation, this pattern of violence that had transpired before that, and no action had been taken. Because again, schools would contact individually, Child Protective Services individually, law enforcement entity. We weren't coming together as a community or a village to identify what's going on. There's no sharing of information, so no one saw the big picture. And so the story of my father.
Excuse me, but your sister never reported that her father was raping her.
Not until a little bit. Hold on, I'll get to it, I promise. So in December of that year.
Sorry, I'm just kind of like hearing some stuff, and like he should have been put away a long time ago. But
yeah, well, that's why I train. That's why I use my past to try to educate practitioners. But
yeah, I won't fast forward anymore. And it sounds like you're trying to talk so fast to get to the end, but you take your time, okay? It's okay.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. So in December of that year, it was the last time that my mom tried to run away. She went to the bedroom window and she wasn't able to escape. My father grabbed her. He asked my siblings and I to get belts and stuff, and he used that to hogtie my mom. The story being that he was trying to protect her from going into a mental institution for the holidays. But after my mom was hogtied, he stood on the back of her head. She was laying face down. He jumped up and down on the back of her head and he spat on her. And overnight she perished. My father actually thought about.
He hogtied and stood on the back of her head, and she died that way.
She died, yes. But he's jumped up and down on the back of her head. So her face was buried in the carpet, and he's jumping up and down on the back of her head, and he spat on her. Now, obviously, when the authorities came, we lied. We were told to. But before we even contacted the authorities, my father actually considered doing a group suicide and then killing himself, which really would have just been 3 more homicides and a suicide. But he fully thought he was going to get arrested. We went to the fire department. The fire department untied my mom. Her body was still.
So she was hogtied. Like, you guys were forced to go get the ropes and the cords and everything, and she was hogtied. And how he killed her was jumping up and down on her head.
On the back of her head, yeah. Ultimately, the coroner would say the cause of death was asphyxiation, but they contributed to her weight and her size, not to my father jumping up on the back of her head. When the fire department untied her, though, her body was still in that same hogtied position, and I learned as a child what rigor mortis was, because my mom was carried out in that same position, her face bloody and smashed, her clothes soiled. And then we went to school on Monday, and the next week we went to school for several more months. It wasn't until, and that's.
So you had to witness your mom being carried out by the coroner. It still wrapped up. They didn't untie her, anything like that.
Yeah. Well, no, they untied her, but her body was still in that same hogtie position. So and
been
wondering what that was, I learned it's rigor mortis, where your body gets frozen in that position. But like I said, we continued to go to.
She was gone
Yeah,
at that time, and brutally beaten. And how old were you?
At that time, I was 13. My youngest sister was 11. My oldest sister was 15. And so what happened is my father got more aggressive with not only the abuse, but also the incest. And I'll just say it this way. You would typically think, like, if a perpetrator is committing rape or incest against a child female, you would think they would go to the next in line for whatever reason. But in my case, he followed age order. And that is probably the most difficult for me because, my father had this insane OCD, and I'd get in trouble for failing to meet his standard, which was not attainable. But then he was also an angry and abusive alcoholic. So he'd wake us up in the middle of the night. Like, he'd grab me out from the bunk bed, grab me by the ankle, pull me out in the middle of the night. I'd drop to the floor. He'd beat me up and have me go wash dishes, and I'm 8 or 9 or something like that. And I, to a certain extent, can rationalize or cope with the physical abuse, but it was the non-physical abuse that happened after the death of my mom that's probably been the hardest for me to.
The emotional or sexual?
Sexual.
So he went from your sister to you sexually, and then so it wasn't just the sisters that got that. It was just all three of you.
I don't think I could have lived there too much longer. I was pretty much at the end. In fact, that's what kind of got us into care. My older sister tried to kill my father unsuccessfully, and then she tried to kill herself. So then they removed my sister. And
what did she do to try to kill him?
Tried to choke him out and stuff. She actually broke his foot, and then she tried to hang herself in the closet from a belt. And then my father, supposedly I and my younger sister discovered her, and I don't recall that, but that's what the records say. My father called 911 because he couldn't get the belt from around her neck, and then hung up when he was able to. Well, they still responded because it was a 911 hang up. They only removed my sister at first. Then she started to disclose some of the sexual abuse, and then my siblings and I were disclosed. Eventually, my father acknowledged all the sexual abuse, at least toward my older sister. But then they let him go, like, from the facility. He was interviewed by the county sheriff and provided all these statements, provided all these details, and they let him go. It wasn't until a week later that they actually filed charges. And then about a year after that he was incarcerated, again, only for the sexual abuse, never for the homicide. But then, I start my life in the foster system, and that presented its own.
Because you were 13 at the time?
I was 13, yeah.
So then you have to be in foster care for the next 5 years, or until your older sister could take care of you. But she had to prove herself to be fit to take care, if she's 18, to take care of her younger siblings.
Yeah, I know she would want to have done that, and I know in her heart she was, but she had to focus on herself, and she has had a lot of struggles. So, and as just being truthful, I'm the only one in my family that wasn't, or that has not been in a mental institution. So both my sisters had a lot of struggles. So she wasn't really in a position to take care of my younger sister or myself.
Right. Well, like I'm saying, she had to be fit, like capable. If you ever saw the Disney movie Lilo and Stitch, we didn't come from domestic violence or anything, but the parents died in a car accident. It's a Disney movie, whatever. Anyway, and social services is looking out, like, really hard on them because whatever. But you're going through all this stuff, and he's not being removed from the home, even just for incest or for the bruises or for any of this. But then sometimes people say the foster care is worse.
The DA didn't want my mom or my father to get arrested because they feared us going into foster care. I mean, that just shows a sad state of affairs if, part of the system views the other part that way.
Right.
Having worked for social services, it's a struggle just to find resource providers. And then when they find a resource provider, a person that opens up their home to a child, and they get a child like me that lashes out and engages in self-destructive behavior and starts cursing and kicking holes in the wall, and they parent, these people have never dealt with this before. They throw their hands up, and sadly, often they'll call law enforcement. And so now you have a traumatized youth that's getting handcuffs and being carried out. And we're just putting them on that path toward not recovery, not healing, but perpetrating, substance abuse, homelessness, etc. So that's
right.
part of the reason why I wrote that children's book.
I used to do in-home counseling, and I would visit these foster kids. A lot of the foster parents do it for the check. So like they would have 8 kids and maybe 2 rooms, bunk beds everywhere, and these kids were poorly dressed and things like that. But they had a widescreen TV and leather couches, and But then there's some that really want to do it. It's time for a second break, and we'll be back in just 1.5 minutes. Please stay tuned with Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. Don't hang up or change the channel. We'll be right back.
We will return to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Warner after these messages.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
If you are like most people, you worry with the financial challenges you face today. How do you protect your family from financial ruin? How will you reduce your liabilities and get out of debt sooner? And how can you deal effectively with the constant changes in your job, your career, and your business? Overcoming your financial challenges is like building a house. You must build from the ground up. You must learn how to make more money, save more money, grow your money, and protect your money. Forever Forward Financial specializes in teaching you these 4 basic money skills so you can achieve your dreams and end your worry. Call us today and schedule your complimentary, no obligation meeting to discuss your needs and concerns. Call Scott Bigley at 727-422-7761.
Hi, this is your host, Tiffany Warner from Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. I want to thank you for all your support on ending the stigma on mental health for over the past 7 years and with over 600 episodes, as well as several award nominations and placing as a finalist in 3 categories on the People's Choice Podcast Award last year. If you're listening to this on audio, please visit and subscribe to my YouTube channel at Moments of Clarity with Tiffany and enjoy viewing previous shows in case you miss any live. If you're interested in advertising and would like to promote your company, it is affordable and an effective way to get your company the attention it deserves. I also welcome potential guests as well, and all information can be found on my website at mocwithtiffany.com. Thank you again for your continued support, as change can only come when we stand together as one. Hi, this is Tiffany Warner, your host of Moments of Clarity. I'd like to give a shout out to musician-songwriter Don Lawson, who wrote, produced, and performed all the vocals and instruments on my Moments of Clarity theme song. Don gained his inspiration as a mental health counselor himself. He's always looking for artists to record his songs, and you can hear more of Don's music at reverbnation.com/Don Lawson. You can also check him out on Twitter at Don Lawson Music. Thank you so much, Don, for your contribution to Moments of Clarity and ending the stigma on mental health. It's awesome.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Now back to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Warner, licensed mental health counselor. To engage in the conversation, call 866-826-1340. Here's Tiffany.
Hello, and welcome back to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. If you're just tuning in, this is Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. I'm Tiffany Warner, licensed mental health counselor and your host. And today it's been a heart-wrenching story of someone that's turned out to really be an advocate for domestic violence, child abuse, incest, everything. And if you haven't heard his story, just to save some time because we're running out of time, please replay this. This is one that you don't want to miss. Hit replay. We're on YouTube at Moments of Clarity with Tiffany or LinkedIn Live or any of the shared podcasts, Apple, Google, you name it. Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. Anyway, welcome back, Albert Grieve, a survivor in so many ways, and I applaud you on that.
Thank you. I do want to talk a little bit about what I'm doing now, but before I do that, once I actually got in the system, I got bounced around for a while, but I finally ended up in a dysfunctional home. And I was in the state of California, which is very liberal, and you would think it would be very protective, but they lacked resources. So I got told my senior year of high school that when I turned 18 in March, that I was going to have to move out. And at the time, I was a 4.0 student at Laguna Creek High School. was on the varsity wrestling team. I was an editor of my school paper, and now all of a sudden I had to come up with money to live on and utilities and home and everything. So I'd actually signed up for the Marine Corps because I didn't want to be homeless and I didn't know what else to do, and I had to quit a lot of my extracurricular activities. But luckily, I had a recruiter from Lincoln University, Missouri, talk to my foster father and convince him to let me stay until the day I graduated high school. And once that was done, the foster agency I was with was able to find funding to pay for me to stay until the day I graduated high school. And so I graduated, I think, June 5th of 2003. And on the very next day, I was on a plane to Missouri with 2 UPS boxes to my name. And the reason why I say that is even if you get a child that comes out of these types of environments and they're able to emancipate, the battle has only begun. Like the journey of healing for me is one it's taken decades, and it's one that I'm still on. I was asked recently if I were to see life as a marathon, what mile would I see myself on? And I really see myself. I was asked recently if I were to see life as being a marathon, and I love using that as a metaphor.
Life is being a marathon. What mile are you on? Huh?
Yeah,
well, it depends on how long we have left.
Well, I see it as being mile 3. I like my first 18 years wasn't
mile 3.
Yeah.
I think you've already completed a marathon and you're on another one. You're like,
but there's so much more life ahead of me.
You're like the person that's running a marathon in every country right now. Like you're like that person. You've already run a marathon before the age of 13. You've run a marathon before the age of 15. Like you are a marathon addict, if that's it.
I appreciate that. But so my kids are everything. I have 3 boys. My oldest is 17, my middle is 9, and my youngest is getting ready to turn 3. And so
how did they get along with Grandpa? Just kidding. I'm kidding. No, it's just a stupid bad joke. Right. No, yeah. But do you have a restraining order against him? Keep him away?
Because he was never charged with any of the acts against me, and I never bothered to file or anything like that. I moved to the Midwest. I mean, completely, halfway across the country. And at this point, I don't fear him or anything like that. I'm actually bigger than him in stature. He's since gotten cancer and everything. I was scared when I reached out.
Take him now. Come
when I was a cop in my early 20s, I used to think I wish I can go see him in prison and just beat the mess out of him. But as I got older, I don't have any hate in my heart because I wouldn't change anything in my life right now. My wife, my kids, I love the life I have.
We've talked about that.
Yeah, exactly.
All of the bad stuff led you to having 3 beautiful boys and a wonderful wife and doing advocacy and motivational speaking and all that stuff. And if you hadn't witnessed and survived such horrible things, then you wouldn't have all of these things to discuss and tell people that it's okay to speak up. It's okay to not be alone. You're not alone.
Yeah.
People go through some horrible things, but you know what? You've experienced the worst days of your life 100% of the time, and you're still here. You're still standing. You're still surviving.
But I think there's so many others I think there's so many others that are like me that can benefit. I still talk with a lot of social workers, and from time to time, they'll tell me about this kid on the caseload that's just a hot mess, and they don't know what to do with them. But to me, that was me. My self-destructive behavior was suicide attempts, but you do have those kids that lash out and engage in very aggressive behaviors. And so that's why I've done that children's book, is to give these kids a means to express themselves. Because you have kids that are dealing with trauma that adults would have difficulty coping with and going through. And they don't know who else to reach out to, and they don't know who to trust. And so they will push
sometimes that abuse is so horrible that you don't know what to do besides you just want it to stop. That's why your sister probably tried to take her life. I mean, most people just either with suicide, they think the world's a better place without them, or they can't handle the world anymore. It's usually
or personally for me, it's just to make the memories and the thoughts go away. And that I was in that place for a long time. And especially when I was litigating and stuff, I had a lot of self-imposed stress because my father's OCD carried through. And so I wanted to do every case perfect because I knew there was a kid in that case, and I was that kid. And so I was holding myself to these unreasonable standards and putting all this pressure on me. in an industry where we're severely understaffed, undercompensated. I would drive 30 or 40 hours a week just to get to court. And then I'm reading case files in my car as I'm driving on back roads, going from one corner of Missouri to the other. And it's just not something that was sustainable.
You think that your father's diagnosis or lack thereof or whatever of obsessive compulsive disorder is what led him to all of these things, like the succession of how he molested his children or things he wanted perfect or things, intrusive thoughts or things like that? Was he ever diagnosed clinically by that?
He was clinically diagnosed when he was incarcerated with OCD, and obviously the alcoholism. And maybe that could explain the physical abuse, but not the sexual. I don't see how that connects to the sexual abuse. I think that's
a lot of people have obsessive compulsive, and obsessions are intrusive thoughts that come into our head that we don't want, that are disturbing to us because they don't make sense. Then the compulsions are if we act on them, but not everyone acts on the compulsions. We do have a caller. We are running out of time, but let's just see. We have LP on the phone. Larry, thank you for calling in. And
hey.
The wrong guy.
What's going on? I just got a quick question. I know, Albert, the work that you're doing with other practitioners, especially legal practitioners and children protection services, is just amazing. And as a former first responder, I got one question for you. What's the toughest thing that you face in training these mandated reporters about child abuse and domestic violence and sexual assault? What's the toughest thing that you seem to run into in your training? Okay.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. There's a couple layers to it. The most difficult thing, honestly, is just standing up and delivering and sharing my story. That's the hardest part. Once I do share, though, I've found time and time again that people there's value in what I have to share. And it's taken me a while to appreciate that. I want to do a perfect presentation all the time. But I've learned that people not only are able to see their own story with increased clarity and stuff, whatever, but there's that shared experience, that commonality, like I've been through it too. I've had some of these presentations where I have a sergeant sitting in the front row, me mugging me the entire time, and I'm like trying to keep him engaged and stuff. And then afterwards, he'll come up to me with tears in his eyes, saying that he had gone through something as well. And it's
Albert, even in our chat from just this show live, I mean, not everyone's comfortable putting on chat. You've got 2 people that are saying that your story touched them and that they can relate. I know that there's more just from this show. So when you say if you can just touch one person, then like this hasn't even been promoted yet. We're just on live, and all these people listening in their cars and listening to the radio, all these other things that aren't commenting. You're an inspiration, Albert.
The other thing I want to bring up, and I don't talk about politics, so I'll just leave it as there was an elected official in Alaska who during a budgetary.
Let me let LP go. Is your question answered? Because we're going to close up the show pretty soon. LP.
Yep. Answer my question. LP out. Have a great day.
Okay. See ya. Thank you so much.
So one of the reasons why I appreciate being on your show is because we need to make noise and we need to speak up about these issues. We need to come together as a community to do more and combat these social issues. And I was so disheartened when earlier this year, during a budgetary meeting, an elected official inquired as to the cost-benefit analysis of allowing a child to die from abuse. And that was so disheartening to me. It's like
allowing a child to die from abuse.
Yes, like they posed the question, well, isn't it cheaper if we let the child die of abuse? You can. I share the links on my social media. It's to me.
That's a whole nother show, but I don't understand. I really don't understand that. But we've got just a few minutes.
But these are the institutions and agencies that are making funding decisions for social services and law enforcement, and the agencies that are tasked with intervening. So that is my biggest goal in life, is create earlier intervention and prevention so we can start a child on this path of healing much sooner, so that we aren't statistics to where like 4% graduate from college or something along those lines, or they end up homeless or perpetrating or something like that. It's not their fault. These things are happening to them. And I think as a community, we need to try to support them more.
Let's leave it at that. Well said. It's not their fault. It's not a child's fault. It never is. And you got a bell and a hand clap on that one. We could go on for hours. I'm going to have you back on the show if you're willing. And what a life you've lived, and what a life do you have now that you've turned out. And things can always change. So don't give up on yourself. And I'm going to say thank you, Albert, for being on the show. Thank you, LP, for calling in. Thanks to Tan Talk Radio for everybody viewing, all the comments, everything. If you're viewing and you're watching this on replay, please share it to your platform so that more people can be educated, and that we got to stick together, and change can only come when we stand together as one. Albert, thank you so much, and for sharing your story on Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. We will be in touch, and great job. And with that, be kind to yourself and to a stranger. You never know what they're going through. And we'll see you Friday, 12 to 1. Every Friday, we're live, 12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time. And we'll see you then. And take care, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. And please, if you see anything out of the ordinary, don't be afraid to report it, because somebody might need your help.
Now it clicks, moments of clarity. Don't put yourself down, time for a change. Believe in yourself, time to rearrange. Be your best friend, bring hope to your day. Lose your critic, get out of your way. Now it clicks, moments of clarity. Now I hear moments of clarity. Now I get it, moments of clarity. To yourself be kind, it will please your mind. Find your joy, trust in you. Put in the time, you'll see how you grow. Many kinds of love you get to define. Find self-love, your soul will alive. Now it clicks, moments of clarity. Now I hear moments of